courtroom holds its breath as the woman steps forward, her shoulders sinking under a weight no one else can see. A crumpled envelope trembles in her hands, its edges worn from too many sleepless nights. When she finally speaks, her apology is barely a whisper, thin, cracked, almost swallowed by silence. Judge Caprio looks up, and something in his face changes. Procedure fades, concern rises. He studies her closely, noticing the exhaustion she tries desperately to hide. The room shifts with him, every eye fixed on a woman fighting to hold herself together. She takes another breath, preparing to reveal the truth she's been carrying alone. And when she finally says it, nothing in that courtroom will remain the same. Before we go further, ask yourself, if you were standing there in her place, what would you hope someone saw in you? Tell us in the comments below right now, please. What began as a routine traffic violation now sits heavy in the air, warped into something far larger than anyone expected. The woman clutches her envelope like it's her last shield against a world that hasn't stopped hitting her. Inside it are the reminders of a life slipping out of control. Unpaid fines stacked like warnings she never had the strength to face. Notices she couldn't answer. Court dates she missed because survival kept pulling her in another direction. People in the gallery exchange quiet glances. It's the familiar look reserved for someone who didn't take responsibility. The silent judgment creeps in until she speaks again. Her voice is still small, but now threaded with a kind of weary honesty that cuts through the room's assumptions. She explains the missed dates, not with excuses, but with the truth of someone barely holding life together. Jobs lost, bills overdue, nights spent deciding between medication and groceries. And through it all, the relentless march of fines that kept growing, as if punishing her simply for being overwhelmed. Judge Caprio listens more intently than anyone. The fatigue in her eyes, the cracks in her voice, the apology she keeps repeating, it all tells a story far bigger than a parking ticket. A story about a woman fighting battles the system never pauses to understand. The room leans in as she hesitates, gathering the courage to share the one reason she's feared saying aloud. And no one expected the next sentence that left Judge Caprio frozen. The real antagonist in this story isn't a single officer, clerk, or official. It's the system itself, a machine built on deadlines, fees, and paperwork, grinding forward whether a person is thriving, struggling, or silently breaking down. A small violation, something as ordinary as a parking ticket or missed sign, starts the chain. The fine seems manageable at first, a simple reminder to be more careful next time. But for someone living on the edge, even manageable becomes a mountain. One missed payment triggers another fee. One missed notice adds another penalty. And before long, a harmless mistake has multiplied into something that demands money she doesn't have and time she can't spare. The system doesn't ask why someone fell behind. It doesn't pause to consider illness, grief, or crisis. A deadline is a deadline. A missed date is a missed date. And in that rigid logic, a single mother undergoing treatment is viewed no differently from someone who simply ignored the rules. In the eyes of the structure, life's chaos holds no weight. All that matters is compliance. People feel this coldness every day. In online comments, in weary conversations on buses, and in break rooms, the frustration is always the same. How something so small can turn into something that swallows months of effort and hope. They talk about fines doubling overnight, about confusing letters arriving with contradictory instructions, about the fear of opening the mailbox because the envelope never brings relief, only reminders of a debt that won't die. And when illness enters the picture, the cruelty sharpens. Treatments require time, money, and strength. But the system doesn't bend. While a person battles for their life, paperwork piles up like a second illness, one that drains dignity instead of health. Those who've lived through it understand the quiet desperation of choosing between another appointment or another fee, hoping one sacrifice doesn't destroy everything else. The tension around the woman in Caprio's courtroom is the same tension millions feel across the country. Her story isn't unique, it's heartbreakingly common. People judge not by their circumstances, but by how perfectly they kept up with rules made for people who never fall behind. And the crowd senses it now. The injustice isn't in her mistake, but in how the machine responded to it. Yet, even in this unforgiving structure, there are moments when someone looks closer. Someone sees the human being buried beneath the files. As she stands trembling before him now, the system's shadow stretching long behind her, something shifts in the room. He sees the exhaustion that isn't laziness, the fear that isn't guilt, the hesitation that comes from carrying far more than any person should be forced to bear. He notices how she clutches the envelope, not out of carelessness, but out of habit, because no matter how life has collapsed around her, she's still trying to do the right thing. That small, stubborn dignity tells a story the paperwork never could. It breaks his heart profoundly. But Caprio sees something everyone else missed. Long before Frank Caprio ever put on a judge's robe, he was just a kid from an immigrant family, learning what dignity looked like from people who owned very little but gave everything. His father, an Italian immigrant milkman, woke up before the sun each day, his hands cracked from labor, his back permanently bent from years of lifting crates. But every morning, without fail, he reminded young Frank that a person's worth wasn't measured in money or education or status. You treat people the way you'd want them to treat your mother, he would say, wiping sweat from his brow. That's real justice. His mother carried a different kind of strength, the quiet, steady compassion of someone who'd lived through hardship but refused to let it harden her. She'd press warm meals into the hands of neighbors who were struggling, insisting they eat before she did. She taught Frank that kindness wasn't weakness, it was courage. Together, his parents built his moral compass long before he ever stepped inside a courtroom. It wasn't textbooks or legal theories that shaped him. It was witnessing the resilience of working-class families, his own included, who navigated life with dignity even when survival was a daily battle. When he finally became a judge, he didn't see a courtroom as a place for punishment first, but as a place where stories mattered. He remembered the single mothers who came to his childhood home asking his mother for help, the men who lost their jobs and felt ashamed to ask his father for credit on milk, the families who fell behind not because they were irresponsible, but because life had given them too much to carry. He brought all of those memories with him to the bench. They became his philosophy. Justice without humanity is just another form of cruelty. So when the woman stands before him now, trembling, apologizing, struggling to steady her breath, he recognizes something instantly. Not guilt, not defiance, but the same weight he once saw in the eyes of people who were doing their best in a world that rarely meets effort with understanding. He sees the exhaustion that comes from months, maybe years, of trying to survive systems that don't care about survival. He sees a woman who has been judged by letters in her mailbox long before she's ever been judged by a person. Her voice reminds him of the women from his neighborhood who juggled 3 jobs and still found time to help someone else. Her hesitation reminds him of the prideful men who couldn't admit when they were drowning. And the way she clutches that envelope reminds him of every neighbor who ever held on to one final hope, even when the world told them it didn't matter. He listens not just with authority, but with memory, with the full weight of a life spent believing compassion is the highest form of justice. And then she says the words that hit him harder than any case before. Her hands tighten around the envelope as she finally forces the words out, each syllable sounding heavier than the last. She tells him she wasn't avoiding the hearings. She wasn't ignoring the notices. She wasn't running from responsibility. She was in chemotherapy. The room freezes. Even the air seems to stop moving. She speaks quietly, almost ashamed, as if battling for her life should require an apology. She explains how the treatments left her too weak to stand, how some mornings she couldn't lift her head, how the world outside the hospital felt like a place she no longer belonged to. As she talks, her voice starts to break, and yet she still repeats the same phrase, "I'm sorry, Your Honor. I really tried." Caprio swallows hard, and for a second he forgets the courtroom, the rules, the file sitting on his desk. His eyes soften with recognition, but his jaw tightens with something else. Anger at a world where someone fighting cancer feels obligated to apologize for not keeping up with fines. He leans forward, hands clasped, looking at her not as a defendant, but as a human being walking through fire with no one to shield her. Whispers ripple through the gallery. People realize they misjudged her, realizing how close she came to breaking under the weight of expectations no sick person should have to carry. Caprio breathes in slowly, preparing to speak, preparing to say something that will shift the entire atmosphere of the room. His next words leave the courtroom speechless. Caprio leans forward, elbows resting gently on the bench, and when he speaks, his voice is low and steady, so controlled that the entire courtroom tilts toward him, waiting. He looks directly at her, then at the envelope she's been gripping like a lifeline. "You have nothing," he says softly, "absolutely nothing to apologize for." The words fall into the silence like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through every person in the room. She blinks, as if unsure she heard him correctly. But Caprio continues before doubt can sink in. He tells her no one fighting for their life should also have to fight their government, their mailbox, their fear of falling behind. He condemns, with calm precision, the way the world piles weight on the shoulders of the vulnerable, then shames them when they stumble. His voice is never raised, never harsh, but the conviction in it is sharper than any gavel he could strike. "You were doing the most important thing a human being can do," he says. "You were trying to survive." The gallery goes still. Even people who came in ready to judge her now look at the floor, realizing how quickly they had assumed the worst. A man in the back wipes his eye. A woman near the aisle grips her purse a little tighter, swallowing a lump in her throat. The emotion spreading across the room is no longer pity, it's recognition. Recognition of how fragile life is, how easily dignity can be taken, and how rare it is to see someone powerful choose empathy over protocol. Caprio reaches for her file, glances at the paperwork, then closes it gently. "These fines," he says, tapping the folder, "are not what define you, and they're certainly not what you should be worrying about right now." His jaw sets with a firmness that makes the entire courtroom lean forward as one. "I'm not going to add to your burden. I'm going to lift it." A soft gasp echoes from somewhere in the crowd. She covers her mouth, stunned. Caprio goes on, telling her that her fines will be waived, every one of them. He tells her the court will not punish her for needing to prioritize her life over deadlines and penalties. And he tells her something else, something that makes her shoulders collapse with relief. "Your job now," he says quietly, "is to get better. That's all. Let the rest go." Her tears come instantly, pouring out of her like a pressure valve finally released. She tries to speak, but the words don't come, only soft sobs that shake her entire frame. People in the gallery begin to cry with her, strangers united by a truth too often forgotten. Compassion is a form of justice. Caprio waits patiently, allowing her the moment. His expression is full of the same gentleness his mother taught him, the same resolve his father carved into him. And when she finally lifts her face, eyes red but hopeful, he gives her a small nod, as if to say she doesn't have to carry anything alone anymore. The room feels lighter, as though the very air has shifted. People will walk out of that courtroom forever changed. They'll talk about this moment at dinner tables, in taxis, online. proof that kindness can still cut through the noise of a world too used to cruelty. But the shockwaves didn't stop at the courtroom doors. The moment the woman stepped out of the courtroom, still wiping her tears, the world had no idea what was coming. But the cameras did. One clip, just 34 seconds long, captured Judge Caprio leaning forward, speaking to her with a gentleness the justice system rarely shows. Within hours, that clip hit social media, and then it exploded. Comments flooded in. This restored my faith in humanity. This is what justice should look like. I'm crying, and I don't even know these people. By the end of the day, hashtags were trending. News outlets replayed the footage on loop. Influencers stitched the clip, voices cracking as they shared their own battles. Cancer diagnoses, single mother struggles, impossible bills stacked on kitchen tables. Thousands of people stepped forward, telling stories they had kept buried for years, suddenly feeling seen, simply because one judge chose compassion over procedure. Celebrities reposted it too. A well-known actor wrote, "Kindness shouldn't be viral, but maybe this is the reminder we all needed." Nurses, teachers, delivery drivers, retired veterans, people who usually pass each other in silence, were now talking, connecting, finding comfort in a moment they weren't even part of. In community groups, the discussion shifted from crime and punishment to empathy and humanity. Local radio hosts debated whether the justice system had drifted too far from its purpose. Commentators called Caprio's decision a national wake-up call. Even those who normally criticize soft rulings went quiet, because this wasn't softness. It was strength wrapped in mercy. And yet beneath the noise, those who watched closely understood something deeper. This moment wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about becoming a feel-good headline. It wasn't even about fines or forgiveness. It was about a rare collision where pain met compassion and compassion won. But as powerful as the reaction was, the real message, the one no one saw coming, was waiting just around the corner. Cliffhanger. And yet the real message wasn't about the case at all. When the noise finally faded, the headlines, the hashtags, the applause, Judge Caprio returned to what mattered most, the quiet truth behind it all. Sitting in his chambers, he reflected not on the viral moment, but on the woman who had stood before him, trembling, exhausted, fighting a battle most people never see. To him, justice was never just a ledger, never just fines, rules, or codes. Justice, he believed, must walk hand in hand with mercy, because laws may guide a society, but compassion holds it together. He often said the courtroom wasn't merely a place to punish wrongdoing. It was a mirror of America's better angels, a place where the powerful could pause long enough to understand the powerless, where dignity could be protected even in moments of despair. And that day, he reminded everyone watching, whether in a wooden courtroom bench or behind a glowing phone screen, that we never truly know the battles others are fighting. Illness, grief, financial storms, loneliness. People carry entire worlds of pain behind calm faces. His words didn't just resolve a case. They rewrote something deeper, a belief that small acts of humanity can ripple further than any sentence ever could. As the woman left with hope instead of humiliation, Caprio felt none of the triumph the world attributed to him. What he felt was simple, the quiet conviction that kindness still mattered. And maybe he thought that was the lesson everyone was searching for all along. And that was the moment that brought an entire courtroom, and millions watching later, to tears. A simple traffic case transformed into a reminder of everything we're losing and everything we still desperately need. Empathy, dignity, and the courage to choose kindness even when the world forgets it. Judge Caprio didn't just waive a fine. He restored something far more precious, a woman's sense of hope, at a time she needed it most. And in doing so, he reminded all of us that justice isn't just about rules. It's about recognizing the human heart, beating behind every struggle, every mistake, every story. If this moment moved you, even a little, then you're exactly the kind of person this channel is built for. Stories of compassion, stories that inspire, stories that prove humanity still exists. So before you scroll away, take a second, like the video, share it with someone who needs this reminder today, and subscribe for more human stories that bring light into dark places, because kindness spreads when we choose to spread it. And remember the final line. Let it guide your day, your choices, your impact. Be the reason someone breathes easier today.